Let's talk World of Tank heavies. We'll start from the heaviest all the way down to the faster and lighter tanks. So let's start right off here with the German Maus. Probably it is the heaviest tank in the game. It is the slowest tank in the game. Uh, Very difficult to kill. Need to shoot along these weld spots. Has a lot of areas of protection in here. You shoot along the mantlet, viewports, these little ports on the side of the turret, the ammo rack along the weld lines, if you could get the shots in, uh, along this wheel well cover if you want to break the tracks. The engine compartment is between the two treads. This tank had two engines, one to drive the front, one to drive the rear. So these two spots here are where you want to try and disable that engine. Very hard tank to kill. Don't try shooting at the engines from the sides. You won't get through this armor and you won't do any damage because you have to penetrate that much tank to get to them. Slowest tank on the field, also the heaviest. Great arty target because it's just not fast enough to get out of its own way. One of the main tanks in Clan Wars right now is the 100, simply because it is such a brute, heavily armored, about a third of the weight less than the Maus, a little bit faster, but also has some great armor. Lower Glacius is very hard to penetrate, but as with other German tanks, if you hit along those weld lines, you will break things. Along the mantlet is a really good spot to shoot because this one is a little more open than the other tanks. You can destroy the viewports, but it doesn't do as much damage. Ammo racking, aim at the emblem or the port in the back. Engine compartment can be damaged from a couple of places. From the rear along the treads. If you can get past the wheel wells, you will do damage on the engine, but very, very difficult to put this one out of commission. If it starts moving, it's going to keep moving until it gets shot from behind. Good tank on the battlefield, very slow. This is the IS-4, probably one of the most underrated tanks in the game. Very good sloped armor, very heavily armored in the front. As with all Russian tanks, if you shoot at the tow hooks, you're going to do damage. This one has a very well protected front, good sloping. You have to do some pretty accurate shooting to do any damage to the turret ring. Commander's hatch is all but invisible. This one, engine compartment, located in the back. You want to hit between the two guide rollers, and you will do some damage to the engine there. Drawback on this tank, a lot of exposed gas tanks, as you can see. This one will set on fire if you hit it with HE in the right spot. Treads are open design. Break the front sprocket, keep the treads broken, and you can kill this tank. Hard to penetrate unless you get at a square angle to it because of the sloping. A lot of boxes on the side to get through, but if you can get through this side of the tank here, you will do damage to the engine components. Kind of hard to get through the log on this side, but it can be done. Very underrated tank, very excellent gun. Fastest heavy right now, IS-7. Might argue some of that with some of the other tanks, but this one is, I believe, the fastest. The great sloped armor, very, very hard to kill. It took a nerf a couple of patches ago. The front end of the tank was changed to reflect a little higher point in the front. If you can hit along this edge here in the lower glacis, you penetrate. If you hit along the mantlet here, you will break the gun. Those are the two main points you want to get at. Of course, breaking the treads also gives you a chance to flank this tank and get shots in on the side. Along this edge here to ammo rack, destroy the engine. Same on the other side, but there's a little more protection over here with the toolboxes and machine guns that are mounted externally. Ammo rack along those two machine guns. Commander's hatch is very difficult to hit unless you're at a high angle. Very good slope tank, typical of the Russian design, very, very bouncy. 110E5, the American Heavy, very fast tank. Not quite the same as the IS-7, but pretty close. Very heavily armored up front. Lower glacis is very difficult to penetrate, very good sloping. A lot of different places to shoot at on this tank. The American tanks are historically better for a gun mantlet. As you can see, this one is a little wider than most of the heavies we'll look at, providing it with some good protection, but it can be penetrated at specific angles. Engine compartment, if you get the rear angle, you will penetrate into the engine compartment. It's hard to put out of commission. Commander's hatch, as you can see, is very high profile, good to shoot at. You can do damage here unless he's hauled down. Good depression on this tank, very difficult to hit if you are angled correctly and sloped. Ammo rack along the vent port and gas tanks. Also along the leading edge on the over the rollers on the driver's side. You can see this vent line here for the driver's side. If you can hit along this edge, you'll do damage into this area and also into the driver. Very hard to hit him from the front, but it can be done if you can get a sloped shot at him. T-57 Heavy is one of my favorite tanks on the main server right now. About a 2,000 DPS per magazine if you can get the shots off. It is an extremely capable tank, very difficult to hurt. The turret ring is probably the most vulnerable area. The front of the tank is very well sloped and armored. It's basically the 110E5 chassis with a auto-loading turret attached to it. Very quick tank, not one you want to fight solo because of the reload, which is about 23 seconds if you get all of the perks and additions on it. Very bouncy tank, very high damage potential. Great fighting tank. Not one to play by yourself. The French 50B, good sloping armor, it'll bounce a lot of shots, but it can take a lot of damage along the turret ring. Great gun, fairly quick, not the fastest, but great acceleration. Engine compartment is probably the easiest damaged of all of them. I believe this is the lightest armored heavy of the group. So you have to play a little smarter, try and get some upslope protection, and try not to get hit to the rear of the turret, otherwise you're going to blow up. Probably the most fun tank I've been playing on the test server is the FV-215B. This has an extremely good gun. It does about 450 damage with gold rounds. Very, very difficult to hurt unless you're at an angle. Engine being in the front, anywhere along this area is dangerous to this tank, so you want to protect it. The driver compartment, hitting in this lower glacis area here, will definitely put the driver out of commission. Alongside any of the exhaust ports here, if you can get the angle shot, you will light this tank up. It does burn. Ammo rack along the port and along the wheel on this side. I believe that's the vent there. This is the ejection port on this side. You get a little bit of spaced armor in here, but that doesn't help very much if you get a shot in here. Commander's hatch is very well sloped. You have to get it at an angle to get any damage done on it, and underneath here to do any turret damage. If you pull this tank in from the reverse slope to turn, The turret for the gun, it is very, very hard to get rid of this tank because the whole body is hidden. One of the queens of the battlefield right now. Everybody's playing one, and it's a lot of fun. Very fast tank, extremely the most accurate gun of all of the heavies. It is a great sniping tank. If you get an opportunity to sit back, it will do a lot of damage, and it's very difficult to hit. Chinese 113, typical of Russian designs, domed turret. Commander hatch is exposed, very difficult to hit because of the slope, but you can do damage there. As you can see, a lot of smooth lines on this tank, very smooth in the front, very, very hard to penetrate the main body or the hull of it. The lower glacis is a little thicker than most of the other Russians. This tank is a little quicker, but again, as with all the Russian designs, you hit the tow hooks, you're going to do damage. This one, the ammo rack, you want to get between the tread and the main body, and you can get to that from either side because of this design. No guide rollers, as you can see. It gives this one some pretty good speed, and the only other places really that I can tell you that to take shots at are the ports here and along the mantlet. External fuel tanks, of course, they will light up if you hit them right, but you have to get at the right angle to do that, and this tank will not let you. Good maneuverability, good speed. So that's it for the heavies, especially in the tier 10 area. So if you have any questions, let me know, and we'll do something for the next test server.